overpromise and underdeliver. And I would like to share how I believe we can accelerate this adventure in the aftermarket, because I think it's not a lack of resources we lack, it's really a lack of resourcefulness. So just before we get going, one quick thing to check with you. I like to give interactive presentations. I like to have lots of fun. I hope you guys like to have fun. Yeah, if you don't, then I'd love to have fun. So I might ask you some questions, I might ask you to shout things out, I might ask you to engage and just raise your hand and acknowledge that you're with me and we're okay, and I will continue. So experts will tell you that the aftermarket is changing. The aftermarket driven by mega trends, driven by aftermarket specific trends. Experts will tell you it's an evolution, others will tell you it's a revolution. Either way, I believe we can all agree that the industry is changing, business is changing. Who of you would say it's society or technology or the competitive marketplace, or if you're in the UK you might go, well, it's legislation that's driving the changes and it's Brexit. But I believe we can all agree that the aftermarket is changing. And it's the greatest change that we've seen in the automotive industry since the invention of the car by Carl Benz in 1886. But in reality, the situation is far worse. And I don't have a flip chart today, so I might ask you to write things down. Write this one down, because I believe that 4 out of 5 aftermarket players are not ready for the change. This is not me saying it, this really comes out of market research in the last couple of years. And what is even worse is that we all know that 60 to 70% of all change initiatives tend to fail. Just think of it for yourself at the moment. Who of you know that you should be exercising more? And I'm one of them. Okay. Who of you know that you should be eating healthier or sleeping more? Yeah. So why don't we do it? Why can't we deal with change? I don't believe we were designed for change. And that's why I believe that, by using the resources we have, by using what we have at our disposal, building and integrating mechanisms to use the resources which is most important, and that's us sitting around here, is people within your organization. I believe we can deliver exceptional results by harnessing the power of high-performing teams. And that's why my question to you is, in your business today, what is your sustainable competitive advantage? Just think about that for a second. If it's okay with you, I haven't met most of you before. We might have had a quick chat, so if it's okay, I'll just share a little bit about myself. I'm an Italian South African. I was born and grew up on the East Rand. Anyone from the East Rand? Anyone know where the East Rand is? Okay, excellent. For those of you who haven't been to the East Rand, go. It's a wonderful place. It's still considered my hometown. And that's actually my 2 boys and my parents who still live out on the East Rand in South Africa. So I'm actually staying there at the moment with them. But that's not what I wanted to talk about. I really wanted to say that during my extensive, diverse and exciting career in the automotive industry, I've spent the last 23 years in corporate in Europe. And during that time, I exceeded even my own expectations, because I set up an aftermarket organization here in South Africa, moved to Europe and Switzerland, was responsible for Europe, Middle East, Africa, and launched over 37 product lines, generated over €1 billion for different companies, led teams on 3 different continents at the same time, and worked with the most amazing people in 35 different countries. But it wasn't always like that, because I remember it was one June, I think it was the 5th of June, I found myself in London at an event hosted by, I can't remember who actually hosted. It was an event which I was actually getting an award for. And I was sitting there with Froth and Sullivan, and they were about to give me an award for a product and service I'd launched. And I was busy thinking back, wow, I've done some things that have worked out, but hell, a lot of things did not work out. And in fact, I probably made more mistakes than the most of you. And in fact, who would like to learn how to make an acquisition, a €10 million acquisition, and within 6 months it's worth less than half of what you paid for it? If you'd like to learn that, just raise your hand. No? Okay. I didn't think there were too many of you. But yes, I have made a lot of mistakes during my time. But as I was sitting there, it kind of hit me, straight between the eyes that where I had been successful, it was really about teams. It was about people. It was about communication, influence, and impact. Where we had failed, it was the lack of it. And that was the moment where I thought, I know what I need to be doing in my life. I know the mission I'm on. There's no time to lose, and I better get going, because I really want to help the automotive industry, whether it's the aftermarket industry, navigate this wall of change that is busy hitting us at the moment. And that's why, today I consult, I train, I coach to people, to teams, to organizations within the automotive industry as well as outside. That picture on the screen at the moment is at a conference in Germany. There were over 300 business leaders, very similar to you in the audience, distributors, manufacturers, and suppliers. Here I am. I don't know if anyone's heard of the company Kongsberg Automotive. Yeah, thank you. Kongsberg, based in Zurich. They brought together their leadership team of around 80 people in Munich, and I got to spend 3 days with them at the request of their CEO. Another conference in Germany, I was the MC for the day and got an opportunity to speak to over 200 business leaders again. And the last one is something where I do outside of it, because I'm speaking to groups of startups, and there were 290 startup organizations, so not automotive. And I absolutely loved speaking to them and connecting with them. One thing you will not know about me is I'm passionate about cycling, and in fact that's at the end of a 7-day cycle race that I finished with a friend of mine. We crossed 4 countries, we did 900 kilometers and climbed 21,000 meters of mountains. And that's France, my best friend, from Bloemfontein. So I'm very much a South African at heart. And what I would like to talk about is some of the key trends in the industry. Now, I know that some of you have heard about the mega trends, the aftermarket specific trends, and you're probably wondering, how do they impact you? How do they impact you? And when I look at mega trends or the aftermarket specific trends, I'm not going to dwell much on the mega trends, because we've heard several discussions, and there was a great one. If anyone met the gentleman from APSA, he did a great talk, so I'm not going to re-say what he said. But one of the things I would like to say is about the mega trends is I was having lunch with the CEO of Automechanika. Anyone heard of Automechanika? And I wouldn't be surprised, it's Switzerland's largest manufacturer. So they're about 2 billion euros. We were having lunch with Martin Herzl, and we were in his favorite restaurant in the center of Zurich, right along the lake and the river that flows out of it. And at one point during the lunch, he kind of looked around. I thought, that's a bit odd, but anyway. Then he leaned forward and he said to me, he says, Robbie, he said, I've just come back from India. I said, okay, that's great. He says, I've just met the CEO of Daimler and the CEO of Toyota. And he says, and I cannot believe how open they are about being uncertain whether their companies will survive. So, write this down. The automotive market is changing, and the changes will impact you. So, because of time, I'm just going to quickly cover on 3 of what I think are the most interesting aftermarket specific trends. The first one is consolidation. To
conclude our Automechanika skills development workshops and talks for the first day in Hall 5, next up we've got Phil Sells from LeaderQuip. He's going to be talking about ensuring correct steering, geometry angles, wheel balancing, and the road.
So consolidation. Who has seen the market consolidating? And when I talk about consolidation, it's really mergers and acquisitions going on, people joining the international trades or buying groups. Coming out of Europe, we have 6 international trades and buying groups, and just combined with their members, they have a total turnover in Europe of 55 billion. Just to give you an idea of the amount of consolidation that's going on. I mean, according to them, they employ 180,000 people in Europe alone. And most of them, you will know if I mention the names, because most of them are represented locally in South Africa. So consolidation is not new. I understand the reasons why companies need to consolidate. The bigger we are, the more powerful we are.
If you have not done so yet, make your way down to Hall 6 to the Body and Paint Championship. This is where body and paint professionals designed a bonnet in a style related culturally to South Africa.
Oh yeah, the bonnet looks really great if you haven't seen it.
These designs are on display, so make your way down to Hall 6 to see these works of art.
While I compete with it. So, consolidation, I understand, it's all about getting bigger, getting stronger, becoming one. The question really is, okay, if consolidation is so important and we see the market and members joining in, mergers, acquisitions going on, so what does that really mean for the aftermarket? Because consolidation has absolutely zero effect on the amount of parts and services sold. They don't make the market bigger, they don't make the market smaller. But where it does impact the market is in terms of profitability, because as these buying groups get bigger, they tend to shift the power to themselves and are able to demand, in most cases, better prices as well as more value-added services from the manufacturers, from the distributors. So they certainly are taking the power of the market channel to themselves and away from the traditional manufacturers, distributors. So that has a critical, major impact on the industry itself. When you look at the second one, which is the OEMs expanding into the industry. Now, what do I mean by the OEMs expanding into the industry? It's really about the OEMs, the vehicle manufacturers, moving in and either through buying distribution channel, through the garage networks, through their own launching of private label products, non-genuine products. I mean, I was speaking to the guys at Eaton today, and they're thinking of bringing out new remanufactured products. So the OEMs have specifically targeted the aftermarket. And why would they target the aftermarket? They target the aftermarket for a number of reasons. Primarily, when you look at it, some of the vehicle manufacturers have already mentioned that vehicle sales, they're expecting a downturn. So as soon as there's a downturn, their profit is going to be under pressure. They're going to be forced to give away bigger discounts, so that compounds it. Then at the same time, we didn't talk about the mega trends, whether it's electric vehicles, connectivity, autonomous driving, but all of those require capital in order to invest into technology and systems, programs for their consumers, for their programs. So they need cash. So they've really strategically targeted the aftermarket where they can gain money from. And when you think about it, how does that change it? Because again, OEMs don't make a market bigger or smaller. The parts sold dictate that. But where it does become interesting for us in the aftermarket is, firstly, they move into the aftermarket, so it will have an effect on our revenue, on our sales, because we're going to be selling less as we have bigger competitors coming in and newer competitors. Secondly, it also has an impact on the profitability of the organization, because OEMs generally own or control various stages in the value chain. So they are able to drive profitability in different ways. So that affects our profitability ourselves. And more importantly, it also changes the power of the market, who actually owns the power. Because as the OEMs come in, power shifts to them as well as they shift it to the consumers. So again, it doesn't look good for traditional distributors, traditional manufacturers and suppliers. Now, the last one I quickly want to touch on is digitization. Now, when you take digitization and you connect it with connectivity or the flow of information, you connect it to the millennium generation, which no one speaks about, but yet is absolutely critical, because by next year, 50% of our workforce, 50% of the people that we're going to see around us are this new millennium generation, yet they think differently, act differently, and are different to the way I am. But we need to understand how to work with them. So when you take digitization and you put it into price transparency, all of this combines into what I like to call almost the perfect storm in the aftermarket. Because as we see digitization taking place, I mean, there's around 8 billion people in the world today. And roughly 3.6 billion people are connected through the internet, through their smartphones, and this changes the way our industry needs to react. And that's why, when you see digitization, you think of price lists. I moved to Europe before the euro. And I remember my pricing manager continuously complaining. He goes, I got a pound. Every country had a different price list. Today, we have two. Today, with digitization, it's become even easier because you can sit there and price transparency is available at a click of the button, sitting right here in the show. You know what your competitors are selling for. And in most cases, even in our own personal lives, who here has bought product online? Anyone book airplane tickets, cars, hotels? So most of us have, used Amazon, and that's becoming more and more. And again, in most cases, before you even go and make your purchase, you've already seen the prices, you know exactly what you want, and you have decided. And it's all moving in that direction, and it's not in the opportunity side. But digitization does give us the opportunity for new business models, for new ideas, and that's why I believe that through digitization in the aftermarket, traditional aftermarket players need to add value. And if you think about from a parts side, and most of us here, when you walk around, you see a lot of traditional parts. Today, the parts we see out here account for 90% of the value sold in the aftermarket. Think about it, 90%. Tomorrow, through e-mobility, and I know that e-mobility is still in its early stages in South Africa, through connectivity, that 90% of what parts you see today, in the next several years, it's going to be down to 40%. Parts are shrinking to 40%. Where's the growth coming, you're probably asking? Well, it's coming from services, it's coming from information, it's coming from content. And again, it's about mining data, managing data, building data to create solutions, to create values for the value chain for our customers. So digitization doesn't change the market size per se, but gives us the wonderful opportunity to certainly generate more revenue, and more importantly, to create more profit. Because when you think about it, I must confess, I'm an Apple fanatic, so I got an Apple computer, an Apple phone. Anyone like Apple or use Apple? Some of you? Okay. The rest of you, you probably haven't tried Apple. If you do, you're going to love it. Or I've heard Samsung's also pretty good. But when I think of Apple, what they will report to you is that 11% of their total sales come through services. So the rest is the product they sell. What they don't tell you is that 60% of their profit come from those 11% of services that they sell. So imagine how profitable their services are. I mean, I thought their products were expensive, but they are making a lot of money on their services. And that's why companies that I've seen today in Europe and globally doing well are the ones moving away from traditional parts to parts and services, or even just directly into services and information. And there's numerous models in various areas in ways that we, today we actually cannot see. So what does all of this mean? When you take the mega trends, when you take the aftermarket specific trends, we know that the industry is changing, and I think we all agree on that one. We know that there's certain impacts on it, and what it really means for the aftermarket, and this is where I come from, it's not good news. I tend to look at it from three different pillars. One is sales or revenue. I look at it from profitability, and I look at it from market structure and who owns market power. And while I'm out there speaking to people, 53% of the people I speak to are either experiencing right now or expect their sales to decline over the next 2 to 3 years. Profitability is not much better, because 42% expect profits to decline if they're not already declining now. The ones which are expecting profits to increase are the only ones that are moving away from parts to parts and services, as mentioned earlier. So that becomes a critical method in how we can increase our revenue as well as our profit. Market structure, well, I used to work for a tier 1 manufacturer, working with distributors. When you look at who owns the market power today, the market power is moving totally away from traditional manufacturers, traditional distributors, to new intermediaries in the market, which we haven't even spoken about, to the consumer, to the OEMs as they aggressively attack the aftermarket. So the market power is really moving everywhere else except for here. And when you think about it, how many opportunities may have passed by this year alone that you haven't taken advantage of? Or put another way, could you be sitting here today making decisions, moving in a direction that takes you further away from your goals rather than closer to your goals? And so what do we do about the problems that we have? Because I believe it's an adventure, and that was the title of this talk. And how do we bring this together? Because what's the difference between success and failure? Anybody want to hazard a guess? Difference between success and failure? Any ideas? Just shout them out. I believe the difference between success and failure is the beliefs.
Yeah.
If you believe you can do something, will determine the way you act. And it's gone too far. And that's why it's Henry Ford who said, whether you believe you can do a thing or not, you're right. And that's why I believe that 80% of our success today, whether it's in our personal or in our professional life, is really about the mindset. So, yeah, you got it. The way we think. The way you think determines the way you feel, the way you act. Putting it in a down-to-earth way. We've had pretty much most of the day today. Who of you have received an email or a phone call, and all you saw was the number or the name or the title, and you reacted, no, I am not answering that one. I know what it's about. No. Or you've seen the phone number or the name and you go, oh yeah, I really want to speak to this person. And the best part of that, you reacted in that way and you didn't even know why you responded that way. And that's why I got to stand over here. And that's why, I believe that success today really is about the way we think, our mindset. Think of it this way, think of your mind as the petrol tank of your car and your thoughts the fuel that you put into it. So whether you got an electric car, petrol or diesel, depending on the fuel you put in, is going to decide whether your car runs very well or maybe doesn't run at all. So thoughts influence. Stopped and thought about how much time you actually spend in meetings. Most people on average, roughly 53% of your work done today is through Teams. And it's not uncommon for you and me to spend 43 to 50% of our day, think of it, 43 to 50% of our time each day in meetings. So we spend a lot of time with people, a lot of time with meetings. And we mentioned earlier that 60 to 70% of all initiatives, strategies, actions fail because they overpromise, underdeliver, and they cost us time, money, and our greatest resources within the organization. There was a recent study by the Blanchard Institution and a training magazine, global study, 13,000 people. And you might be surprised that only 27% of these 13,000 people globally said, well, we feel our teams are high performing the majority of the time. Less than 3% actually said, yeah, our teams are high performing less than half the time. And that's why, again, I associate it back to 60 to 70% of the initiatives we do personally or as a group tend to fail. So what do we do about that? Because I believe if you use teamwork to drive results, you will harness the power of high-performing teams. And organizations that do that, organizations that utilize that, have the opportunity to bring in a multitude of new skills and talents that you don't have, because everyone has got our own thoughts, our own strengths, our own weaknesses. So combine those, we can solve literally any complex market, competitive, organizational issue that we face today. High-performing teams also execute quicker, execute on time, deliver results, and drive forward. So quite often you will find improved collaboration is one of the things that high-performing organizations tend to find, because you're bringing together skills, different areas, and you get synergy going. So 1 + 1 truly becomes 3, 4, or 5. These organizations also tend to see and achieve exceptional results on an ongoing basis. And it's exceptional results because you've got the people that come together, teams are empowered, they're accountable, they drive change, drive results, meet deadlines, make things happen. Let me ask you a question. Most of the people that you have either in your organization or you associate with, how many of you would say, "Oh, I'm doing what I'm meant to be doing because accountable to myself," does not work. So that you need to create the accountability within the organization, within the team. And you will also see increased innovation, because I believe when you bring people together with different beliefs, different values, different ideas, these people work together to find creative solutions to the problems we have by developing innovative solutions that we don't have today. And again, remember what I said, what you believe is what you're going to do. And lastly, high-performing teams consistently perform at high levels. So what do I mean by that? I mean by that if you are part of a successful team, high-performing team, you suddenly feel differently, and believe it or not, you will start to share those results, those skills within the organization. And before you know it, you don't just have one team, but you've got a whole organization of high-performing teams, and you become a truly high-performing organization. So how do we go about creating high-performing teams? What is that all about? Creating a high-performing teams. I believe there are really three pillars to it. And the first one is developing a team mindset. And when I talk about team mindset, I know I've mentioned a little bit about it, but team mindset is giving the people a cognitive approach or cognitive understanding on the actual topic itself. Because this perspective will help you to look at things differently, will help you evaluate, challenge the assumptions that have been given to you today. And again, who knows the old adage saying of, is the glass half full or half empty? Because the way you see it will determine the way you feel, the way you act, and the way you're going to drive change forward. So team mindset, absolutely critical, I believe. And along with that, it's also, we need to give the people within our organization three other key critical elements. The first critical key element is to give them a clarity, a perspective. Why is the team coming together? What is the purpose? What are the roles of our organization? What does a good picture look like? Quite often we tell teams to go away and do things, and we do kids, as I said earlier, and the way I discipline, motivate the one versus the way I do the other is totally different. They are two totally different kids. What works with one doesn't work with the other. But do I always take the same approach when I go to the office, dealing with people, dealing on different subjects, different areas of interest, skills, and expertise, as well as motivation? So there are 4 predictable stages, and we need to know how to communicate, influence, to impact the people we work with. The last point is really, how do we learn, lead, practice these? Because unless we actually practice them and bring them into our DNA and do them subconsciously, because 95% of the time, I believe, we operate subconsciously. Has anyone had the experience where you've climbed in your car, driven somewhere, gotten out the car and gone, how did I actually get here? If you've had that, you've worked subconsciously, and most of the times we operate subconsciously. It's the same thing, if I had to say to you, I'm gonna ask you to think of a color. I will give you the color, but you think about the first word that comes to mind when I mention the color. So in a second I'll give you the color. First association that comes to mind. The color is red. Just shout out. What were some of the first things that came to mind? You had pink, okay. Anything else that you had associated with the color red?
Stop.
Stop?
White.
Okay. So some of the things that we have, danger, speed, power, speak to someone else, they might go, ooh, romance. Red is romance. Who's wrong? Who's right? But these are the associations we automatically make. So we need to practice the skills so that we integrate them and utilize them subconsciously without having to think about it. Because there's Maslow who said there's 4 levels of learning. And think about when you learned how to tie your shoelaces. I mean, the first time when you were young, you didn't even know that you needed to tie your shoelaces. Then you suddenly found out that you were falling over, and you looked at your friends and you go, they're not falling over. What are they doing differently? Oh, their shoes are tied. Okay. That was this first stage. Second stage, you started to do it. It was uncomfortable. You got it all wrong. Third stage, you started to do it, and someone would ask you a question, and you'd go, stop, don't. I'm focusing, I'm concentrating. I got to get this right. By now, I can guarantee that I'm willing to bet anything you want that any one of you can tie your shoelaces in the middle of the night blindfolded. Would you agree with them? But it's because you've practiced the skill 1,000,001 times. So I just wanted to leave you with that. And just to tie up what we've spoken about today, because I've absolutely enjoyed all of you guys being here, and I've enjoyed our time together. So I believe there's some real opportunities to grow your business. I believe there's some real opportunities for success. And that's why I say, if you've enjoyed this presentation, or maybe just to make me feel good, just would you raise your hand if that's you? Thank you. At least I feel better about myself. No, thank you. And quite often I've seen that, as people, we tend to get stuck in the same thing. We do the same thing over and over and over again, and we don't even, people is what it's all about. People are the heartbeat. Really, they are the heartbeat of our organizations. If our people are thriving, our teams are thriving, our business is thriving. If the heartbeat is off, well, then the whole business is off. So I just wanted to leave you with that, and I just wanted to say thank you so much for being here today, and I'm open to any Q&A that you may have for as long as you're here. So if you have any questions, any thoughts, anything, please, let me know, or we can talk.